The Galactic Council chamber stretched endlessly upward, its crystal walls reflecting the light of 1,000 suns from across known space. Representatives from 47 different species sat in their designated sections, each area modified to accommodate their unique physiological needs. The Zephyrians floated in their gas-filled tubes, the rock-like granites sat motionless on reinforced platforms, and the insectoid hive minds clustered together in their shared consciousness pods. At the center of it all, looking remarkably ordinary in comparison, sat the human delegation. Ambassador Sarah Chen adjusted her simple blue uniform and looked around the massive chamber. Even after 3 years of serving as Earth's primary representative, she still felt overwhelmed by the sheer scope of galactic civilization. Humanity had only been part of the Galactic Council for 5 years, making them the newest and least understood species in the Alliance. "The matter before us today," announced the Vorthan speaker, his tentacles writhing as he communicated through bioelectric pulses that were translated into various languages, concerns the recent incident in the Kepler 442 system. The human military unit, designated as Knights of Terra, took actions that resulted in significant tactical losses while achieving minimal strategic gain. Sarah felt her jaw tighten. The Knights of Terra were humanity's elite peacekeeping force, and their recent mission had saved over 10,000 civilian lives from 3 different species. But apparently, the Galactic Council saw it differently. "We must understand," continued the Vorthan speaker, "why humans consistently make decisions that appear to contradict basic military logic. The Kepler 442 incident is merely the latest example of this peculiar behavior." The crystalline representative pulsed with cold blue light as it spoke. "Our analysis indicates that the human unit had 3 opportunities to retreat and preserve their forces. Instead, they chose to remain and defend a position with no strategic value. 17 humans died unnecessarily. The position they defended was a refugee camp," Sarah said, standing up. "Those weren't strategic targets. They were families, children, elderly civilians who couldn't evacuate fast enough when the raiders attacked." "Precisely our point," buzzed the insectoid collective through their shared voice box. "No logical military doctrine supports trading trained soldiers for untrained civilians of other species. The mathematical equation is simple. Trained soldiers have greater long-term value than random civilians." Sarah looked around the chamber, seeing the same expression on every alien face, or what passed for faces. Confusion. These beings had conquered space, mastered technology beyond human imagination, and created a galactic civilization that had lasted for millennia. But they genuinely could not understand why humans would sacrifice themselves for strangers. "You call them knights," said the ethereal representative, its form shifting like smoke as it spoke. "We have studied your historical records, but this concept makes no logical sense. A knight was a warrior bound by something you call chivalry. But our analysts cannot quantify what this means in practical terms." Sarah thought of Captain Marcus Rodriguez, who had led the Knights of Terra in the Kepler 442 system. She had known Marcus since their academy days. He was smart, tactical, and absolutely devoted to the knightly ideals that had been revived when humanity entered space. "Chivalry isn't something you can measure in a laboratory," Sarah replied. "It's about protecting those who can't protect themselves. It's about keeping your word, even when breaking it would be easier. It's about doing what's right, not what's profitable." "But why?" asked the geometric minds, their crystalline structures rotating in what Sarah had learned indicated deep confusion. "What evolutionary advantage does this provide? How does sacrificing efficiency for abstract concepts help a species survive?" The question hung in the air, translated into dozens of languages and thought patterns. Every species in the chamber waited for an answer that would make sense to them. Sarah realized that this was the core problem. Every other species in the galaxy had evolved with different pressures, different environments, different social structures. The crystalline minds were collective intelligences that shared all thoughts. The insectoids were hive-minded beings, where individual sacrifice for the collective was automatic. The ethereals existed partially outside normal space-time and viewed events from a cosmic perspective. But humans had evolved on a planet where small groups had to cooperate to survive. where individual choice mattered, where heroes emerged not from programming or evolution, but from personal decision to stand up for others. "Let me tell you about Sir Gareth Blackwood," Sarah said, accessing her personal files. "He was a knight in medieval England, over 800 years ago." The aliens leaned forward, or performed whatever gesture indicated attention for their species. Sir Gareth was traveling to an important battle where his lord needed every sword. On the way, he came across a small village being attacked by bandits. The villagers were nobody important. They couldn't pay him. They had nothing to offer except their lives. Sarah pulled up a holographic display showing historical records. According to all military logic, Sir Gareth should have continued to the battle. His lord's cause was more important than one village, but Sir Gareth stayed. He fought off the bandits, saved the village, and arrived too late for the main battle. "So he failed in his primary mission," observed the Vorthen speaker. "His lord thought so too," Sarah continued. "Sir Gareth was stripped of his lands and titles, but the villagers he saved remembered him. Their children remembered him. Stories about Sir Gareth spread across England, inspiring others to act with honor." The insectoid collective buzzed with agitation. "This makes no sense. He lost status, resources, and strategic position for no gain." "But there was gain," Sarah insisted. 300 years later, when England faced invasion by a foreign army, the descendants of that village formed the core of a resistance movement. They fought not for king or country, but because they remembered stories of Sir Gareth. Stories about protecting the innocent, about doing what was right, regardless of personal cost. The chamber fell silent. Sarah could see the aliens trying to process this information through their various logical frameworks, and failing. "You're saying," said the ethereal representative slowly, "that inefficient behavior in one time period can create emotional resonance that influences behavior centuries later?" "I'm saying that the idea of knighthood isn't just about individual knights," Sarah explained. "It's about creating a code of behavior that spreads through society. When people see someone sacrifice for others, it inspires them to be better than they thought possible." The geometric minds rotated faster. "But this is completely unpredictable. You cannot calculate the long-term effects of such behavior." "That's exactly the point," Sarah said. "You can't calculate it because it's not about calculation. It's about faith. Faith that doing the right thing matters, even when you can't prove it will work out." Dr. Elena Vasquez, the human cultural attaché, stood up beside Sarah. "If I may add something, colleagues, we've been studying why this concept is so difficult for other species to understand." The chamber's attention turned to her. Elena had spent her career studying comparative xenopsychology, and her insights had proven valuable in previous diplomatic crises. "Every species here evolved from different environmental pressures," Elena continued. "The crystalline minds evolved from geological processes, where efficiency and resource optimization were paramount for survival. The insectoids developed from hive structures where individual sacrifice for the collective was biologically programmed." Elena gestured toward the various alien sections. "But humans evolved from small tribal groups, where cooperation was voluntary, not programmed. We had to develop social structures that would make individuals choose to help others, even strangers, even when it went against immediate self-interest." "Fascinating," pulsed the crystalline representative. "You are suggesting that knighthood is a cultural evolution designed to override biological self-interest." "More than that," Sarah added. "Knighthood represents humans at our best. It's the promise that no matter how dark things get, there will always be someone willing to stand up for others, someone who will keep their word, protect the innocent, and fight for what's right." The Vorthen speaker's tentacles writhed thoughtfully. "This explains the psychological profile of your Knights of Terra. Our combat analysts have noted that human knights fight with a ferocity that seems to exceed normal biological parameters. When a knight takes their oath," Elena explained, "they're not just promising to follow orders or serve efficiently, they're promising to become something more than human to be worthy of the ideals they represent." "But surely," interrupted the insectoid collective, This leads to inefficient decision-making in military contexts. Sarah smiled grimly. Let me tell you about the Battle of Thermopylae Gap. 3 years ago, every being in the chamber had heard of Thermopylae Gap. It was one of the most studied military engagements since humanity joined the galactic community. The Fourth Fleet was outnumbered 15-1 by marauder forces, Sarah continued. According to every tactical simulation run by every species, the logical choice was to retreat and preserve forces for a later engagement. Yes, agreed the geometric minds. We ran those simulations ourselves. Retreat was the optimal strategy. But Commander Lisa Zhang and her Knights of Terra didn't retreat, Sarah said. They held the gap for 72 hours, allowing 3 million civilians to evacuate from the threatened systems, and lost 60% of their fleet in the process, pointed out the ethereal representative. But those 3 million people lived, Sarah countered. And when word spread about what the Knights had done, 17 independent systems volunteered to join the Galactic Council's defense force. Recruitment for peacekeeping forces increased by 400% across human space. The chamber buzzed with various forms of alien discussion. Sarah could see them trying to fit this information into their logical frameworks, and she realized they were beginning to understand not the logic of knighthood, but the fact that it operated on a completely different kind of logic. You see, Sarah concluded, you keep trying to understand knights, as if they were just soldiers with inefficient programming. But that's not what they are. Knights are symbols. They represent the idea that someone will always stand between the innocent and harm, no matter the cost. The Vorthan speaker was silent for a long moment. And you believe this? Symbolic value provides practical benefits? I know it does, Sarah said firmly. Every time a knight stands up for others, it proves that the ideals are real. It shows that someone still believes in honor, justice, and protecting the innocent, and that makes others want to live up to those same ideals. As Sarah sat back down, she noticed something she had never seen before in the Galactic Council chamber. The aliens weren't just confused anymore. They were thinking. Really thinking. Not just calculating. For the first time, they were trying to understand something that couldn't be quantified or optimized. The ethereal representative spoke first. This concept of knight appears to be a self-reinforcing cultural mechanism that transforms individual psychology through symbolic representation. In simpler terms, Elena translated with a slight smile, knights inspire people to be better than they thought they could be. The chamber fell silent again, but this time it was thoughtful silence rather than confused silence. Sarah had the distinct feeling that something important had just happened, though she couldn't quite identify what it was. Finally, the Vorthan speaker addressed the chamber. It appears we must reconsider our analysis of human military doctrine. The Knights of Terra may operate on principles we do not fully comprehend, but their effectiveness cannot be denied. As the session adjourned, Sarah gathered her materials and prepared to leave. She had defended humanity's knights as best she could, but she knew the real test would 3 months after the Galactic Council session. The crisis that would test everything arrived without warning. Captain Marcus Rodriguez stood on the bridge of the TCS Excalibur, watching the tactical display with growing concern. The ship drifted in space near the outer rim of the Sigma Draconis system, along with the rest of the Knights of Terra Rapid Response Fleet. What they had found there defied all previous understanding of galactic politics. Status report, Commander Hayes, Marcus said to his second-in-command. Commander James Hayes pulled up the sensor data on the main screen. Sir, we have confirmed the presence of a previously unknown species on Sigma Draconis 3. They call themselves the Devourers, and their technology is unlike anything we've encountered. Marcus studied the data flowing across multiple screens. The Devourers had appeared suddenly, emerging from what seemed to be another dimension entirely. Their ships were organic, grown rather than built, and their weapons converted matter directly into energy. More disturbing were the reports from the planet's surface. What about the civilian population? Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. 15 million beings from 6 different species? Hayes replied grimly. The planet serves as a major cultural exchange hub. There are Vorthan philosophers, crystalline art installations, insectoid research colonies, and even some human settlements. The tactical officer, Lieutenant Sarah Park, looked up from her console. "Sir, the Devourers aren't just attacking military targets. Our scans show they're systematically harvesting the population. They appear to consume intelligent life for sustenance." A chill ran down Marcus's spine. In all his years of military service, he had never encountered anything quite like this. The galaxy had pirates, raiders, and aggressive species. But this was something else, entirely, an enemy that literally fed on sentient beings. "What's our fleet strength?" Marcus asked. 12 ships, Hayes answered. "The Devourers have 43 vessels, each larger than our dreadnoughts. Admiral Chen has ordered a full withdrawal to prepare for a coordinated galactic response." Marcus nodded. It made tactical sense. The Knights of Terra were brave, but they weren't suicidal. Facing overwhelming odds without support was exactly the kind of decision that had frustrated the Galactic Council for years. "Sir," Lieutenant Park interrupted, "we're receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. Put it through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a desperate scene. A Vorthan civilian, his tentacles trembling with fear, spoke directly to the camera. Behind him, Marcus could see beings of various species huddled together in what appeared to be a hastily constructed shelter. "This is Counselor Thexir from the Cultural Exchange Center," the Vorthan said. "The Devourers have broken through our defenses. We estimate 6 hours before they reach the civilian shelters. If anyone can hear this, please. We have children here. Younglings from every species. They don't deserve this fate. Reelings really pard. We have children here. We have children here." The transmission cut out. The bridge fell silent. Marcus looked around at his crew, seeing the same expression on every face that he felt in his own heart. These weren't soldiers they would be abandoning. These were families, children, scholars, and artists who had come to Sigma Draconis III to celebrate the diversity of galactic civilization. "Sir," Hayes said quietly, "Admiral Chen's orders are clear. We're to withdraw immediately." Marcus pulled up the tactical analysis on his personal display. The math was brutal. Even if they managed to break through the Devourer fleet, they would lose most of their ships in the process, and there was no guarantee they could evacuate 15 million beings before the Devourers overwhelmed them. From a purely military standpoint, the decision was obvious. Preserve the fleet, wait for reinforcements, and mount a proper offensive with better odds. But Marcus thought of the oath he had taken when he became a Knight of Terra. To protect the innocent, to stand between the helpless and harm, to be worthy of the trust placed in us. The oath didn't include clauses about acceptable odds or strategic value. "Commander Hayes," Marcus said finally, "open a channel to the fleet." "Sir," Admiral Chen specifically ordered. "Open the channel, Commander." The communications officer activated the fleet-wide frequency. Marcus took a deep breath, knowing that what he said next would either save 15 million lives or destroy 12 ships and their crews. "Knights of Terra, this is Captain Rodriguez. You all heard the transmission from the surface. 15 million civilians are about to be consumed by an enemy unlike any we've faced before." Marcus paused, looking at each member of his bridge crew. "Admiral Chen has ordered us to withdraw. From a tactical standpoint, it's the right decision. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and the odds of success are minimal." Through the fleet channel, Marcus could hear the subtle sounds of 12 ship crews waiting for his words. "But we didn't become knights because it was tactically sound. We became knights because someone has to stand between the innocent and the darkness. Someone has to be willing to say that some things are more important than odds or strategy." Marcus activated his command console, displaying the tactical situation to all ships simultaneously. "I won't order anyone to follow me. Each captain must make their own choice. But I'm taking the Excalibur to Sigma Draconis III. Those civilians trusted the galaxy to protect them, and I won't let them down." The responses came immediately, one after another. "TCS Lancelot standing by, sir. TCS Gawain, ready for action. TCS Percival, at your command." All 12 ships signaled their commitment. Marcus felt a surge of pride mixed with sorrow. These crews knew they were probably flying to their deaths, but they also knew that the alternative was living with the knowledge that they had abandoned 15 million innocent beings. "Very well," Marcus said. "All ships, prepare for combat approach. Remember, our goal isn't to defeat the Devourer fleet. Our goal is to buy time for civilian evacuation." As the Knights of Terra fleet accelerated toward the inner system, Marcus received a priority transmission from the Galactic Council emergency session that had been called in response to the crisis. Ambassador Sarah Chen appeared on his personal screen, her face grave. "Marcus, you need to abort this mission immediately. We've received intelligence about the Devourer technology. Their weapons don't just destroy ships, they drain the life force of the crews. Any being killed by their weapons becomes part of their collective consciousness." "Sarah," Marcus replied, "we can't abandon those civilians." "You're not abandoning them," Sarah insisted. "The crystalline minds are calculating optimal defensive strategies. The insectoid collective is mobilizing their war fleets. The ethereals are attempting to understand the dimensional technology the Devourers use." "And how long will all that take?" Marcus asked. Sarah's hesitation told him everything. "Best estimates suggest a coordinated response could be ready in 72 hours. The civilians have 6 hours, Sarah, maybe less." "Marcus, please. Think about this logically. 12 ships against 43 won't make any difference. You'll just be throwing away lives for no gain." Marcus smiled sadly. "You remember what we discussed in the council chamber? About how other species can't understand the concept of a knight? This isn't the time for philosophy, Marcus." "It's exactly the time for philosophy," Marcus replied, "because what you're asking me to do is abandon the one thing that makes us knights. You're asking me to calculate the value of innocent lives against military assets." The transmission from the council chamber suddenly shifted, and Marcus found himself looking at multiple alien representatives who had apparently been monitoring the conversation. "Captain Rodriguez," said the Vorthan speaker, "we have been analyzing your decision to disobey direct orders. Our assessment is that your emotional attachment to abstract concepts is overriding logical military thinking." "With respect, sir," Marcus replied, "my emotional attachment to abstract concepts is exactly what makes humans effective in situations like this." The crystalline representative pulsed with blue light. "We fail to see how emotional decision-making provides tactical advantages against superior forces." Marcus looked at the tactical display, where his fleet was approaching the outer edge of the Devourer formation. In 40 minutes, they would be in weapons range. "Let me explain something about being a knight," Marcus said to the assembled aliens. "It's not about winning every battle. It's about making sure that when people are in danger, someone shows up. Someone stands between them and the darkness." "But you cannot possibly succeed," buzzed the insectoid collective. "Maybe not," Marcus acknowledged. "But success isn't always measured in victory. Sometimes it's measured in witness." The ethereal representative shimmered. "Explain this concept of witness." Marcus thought of Sir Gareth Blackwood, the medieval knight that Ambassador Chen had mentioned in the council chamber. When Sir Gareth stayed to defend that village, he knew he might miss the important battle. But the villagers saw him stay. They witnessed someone choosing their safety over his own advancement. "And this matters because? Because it proved to them that honor was real," Marcus continued. "That someone actually believed those ideals strongly enough to sacrifice for them. And that proof changed how they saw the world." Lieutenant Park interrupted from her station. "Sir, we're receiving multiple transmissions from the planet's surface. Word has spread that the Knights of Terra are coming. Put it through." The main screen filled with faces, Vorthan tentacles writhing with hope instead of fear, crystalline beings pulsing with warm light, insectoid creatures clicking in complex harmonies, and humans, their faces showing a mixture of pride and determination. A young girl, maybe 10 years old and clearly human, looked directly into the transmission device. "Thank you for coming," she said simply. "Mama said you might not make it in time. But at least someone cared enough to try." Marcus felt his throat tighten. This was why knights existed, not for tactical advantage or strategic gain, but to be the person who shows up when everyone else has given up hope. "All ships," Marcus commanded. Battle stations. Target the Devourer vessels closest to the planet. Our job is to draw their attention and buy time for evacuation shuttles. The Galactic Council representatives continued their debate on the secondary channel, but Marcus tuned them out. They were trying to quantify something that couldn't be measured. The value of proving that someone cared enough to fight impossible odds. As the TCS Excalibur entered weapons range, Marcus thought about all the knights throughout human history who had faced overwhelming odds. At Thermopylae, at Ronchevo, at the Alamo, humans had always produced people willing to stand against the darkness, knowing they probably wouldn't survive. "Weapons ready, sir," reported the tactical officer. "Target the lead Devourer vessel," Marcus ordered. "All ships, engage." The battle was joined. 12 human ships against 43 alien monsters, with 15 million lives hanging in the balance, and the entire galaxy watching to see what the Knights of Terra would choose when faced with impossible odds. As energy beams lanced through space and organic Devourer ships responded with weapons that seemed to twist reality itself, Marcus understood that this was more than a battle. This was a demonstration of what it meant to be human, what it meant to be a knight, and why some concepts couldn't be explained, they could only be witnessed. The aliens in the Galactic Council chamber watched in silence, finally beginning to understand that they weren't just observing a military engagement, they were watching the human spirit in action, and for the first time, some of them were starting to grasp why the concept of a knight was something uniquely human. The battle raged on, and Marcus knew that win or lose, the galaxy would never see humanity quite the same way again. Come, when the next crisis arose, would the galaxy accept that some things couldn't be calculated or optimized? Would they understand that humans needed their knights, not despite their inefficiency, but because of what they represented? Dr. Elena Vasquez approached her as they walked toward the exit. "Do you think they understood?" Sarah looked back at the massive chamber, where aliens were still discussing the session in their various languages and thought patterns. "I think they understood that they don't understand." The battle for Sigma Draconis III raged for 6 hours, and when it finally ended, the galaxy had witnessed something no computer simulation could have predicted. Ambassador Sarah Chen stood in the Galactic Council emergency chamber, watching the real-time tactical feeds with a mixture of pride, heartbreak, and amazement. Around her, representatives from 47 species observed in stunned silence as the impossible unfolded on their screens. The Knights of Terra had lost 8 of their 12 ships. Over 2,000 human crew members had been consumed by the Devourer's terrible weapons, their life essence absorbed into the alien collective. By every mathematical calculation, it should have been a complete disaster. But 15 million civilians had been evacuated successfully. More importantly, something had happened during the battle that no one had anticipated, something that would change the galaxy's understanding of warfare, consciousness, and the power of human ideals. "Status report from the TCS Excalibur," announced the Vorthan speaker, his tentacles trembling as he processed the incoming data. Captain Marcus Rodriguez appeared on the main display, his uniform torn and face blackened with smoke, but his eyes bright with an emotion the aliens were beginning to recognize. "Mission accomplished," Marcus reported. "All civilian transports have reached safe jump distance. The Devourer fleet has been—" He paused, searching for the right words. "Well, they've been neutralized, but not in any way our tactical manuals cover." The crystalline representative pulsed with confused light. "Captain Rodriguez, our sensors indicate that the Devourer vessels are intact. How have they been neutralized?" Marcus looked off-screen for a moment, consulting with someone outside the transmission range. "It would be easier to show you than explain. Commander Hayes, bring her over." The camera angle widened, and Sarah felt her breath catch. Walking onto the bridge of the Excalibur was a being unlike any they had encountered, humanoid in shape, but clearly of Devourer origin, with the same organic technology integrated into its form. But instead of the predatory menace that characterized the Devourers, this being moved with something approaching reverence. "This is Ziexara," Marcus explained. "She was part of the Devourer collective consciousness until about 3 hours ago." The assembled aliens erupted in their various forms of shocked communication. The insectoid collective buzzed frantically, the ethereals shimmered with agitation, and the geometric mines spun at maximum velocity. Impossible, stated the Vorthan speaker flatly. The Devourer collective consciousness cannot be separated. Our preliminary scans showed them to be a hive mind with no individual personality matrices. Zixara stepped forward, and when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that seemed to resonate with something deeper than language. I was part of the collective for 700 years, she said. We consumed over 4,000 species, absorbing their consciousness, their memories, their essence. We were perfect unity, perfect efficiency, perfect hunger. She paused, looking around the council chamber with eyes that seemed to hold depths of experience no single being should possess. Then we encountered the Knights. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had been monitoring from Earth, interrupted the transmission. I'm sorry, but I need clarification. Are you saying that contact with human consciousness somehow disrupted the Devourer collective? Not contact, Zixara corrected. Witness. Witness. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. That word again, witness. The same concept Marcus had tried to explain to the council representatives during the battle. When we consumed the first night, Zixara continued, we expected to absorb another consciousness, another set of memories and skills. Instead, we absorbed something that had never existed in our collective before. The ethereal representative flickered with interest. What was this new element? Choice. Zixara said simply. Pure, voluntary choice to sacrifice for others. Not programmed behavior. Not evolutionary compulsion. Not collective optimization. Individual choice to place another's well-being above one's own survival. Marcus stepped forward. Every knight who died transmitted their final thoughts through the Devourer weapons. Those thoughts became part of the collective consciousness. But, interrupted the geometric minds, thoughts and memories are just information. How could information disrupt a stable collective consciousness? Zixara turned toward their section of the chamber. Because the thoughts we absorbed weren't just information. They were proof that consciousness could exist for purposes beyond survival, beyond efficiency, beyond hunger. Beyond hunger. She gestured toward the tactical display, which still showed the aftermath of the battle. For 700 years, our collective had one purpose: consume and grow. Every consciousness we absorbed accepted this purpose, either willingly or through force. But the Knights, her voice carried a note of wonder that sent shivers through the chamber. The Knights chose to die for beings they had never met, from species they barely understood, for no reward except the knowledge that they had kept a promise. When that choice became part of our collective consciousness, it created a cascade effect. Sarah began to understand what had happened. The concept of voluntary sacrifice for others was so foreign to the Devourer collective that it acted like a virus in their shared consciousness. More than that, Zixara confirmed. It proved that there were ways of thinking, ways of being, that we had never encountered. For the first time in 700 years, members of the collective began to question our purpose. Dr. Vasquez pulled up neurological scans on a secondary display. The brain patterns of the surviving Devourer crews show massive changes in their neural networks. It's as if they've developed individual personality matrices within ours. Because we have, Zixara said. The concept of knighthood, of voluntary sacrifice for abstract ideals, was so powerful that it overrode our collective programming. Suddenly, we could imagine existing for purposes other than consumption. The Vorthan speaker's tentacles writhed in agitation. This makes no sense. How can a philosophical concept have such immediate physiological effects? Because, Marcus interrupted, you're still thinking of it as just a concept. But knighthood isn't just an idea, it's a way of experiencing existence. When the Devourers absorbed the consciousness of dying knights, they didn't just get memories, they got the actual experience of choosing to die for others. Commander Hayes stepped into the transmission. Sir, we're receiving reports from the other Devourer ships. They're all undergoing the same transformation. Sarah watched in amazement as the tactical display updated. 43 Devourer vessels were transmitting surrender signals. But more than that, they were broadcasting requests for asylum, for protection, for help in understanding what had happened to them. They've gone from being a collective consciousness focused on consumption to being individual beings trying to understand concepts like honor, sacrifice, and justice, Marcus explained, all because they witnessed what it means to be a knight. The crystalline representative pulsed with rapid light patterns. The implications of this are staggering. You're suggesting that human psychological concepts can literally reprogram other forms of consciousness? Not just any concepts, Sarah said, beginning to understand the full scope of what had occurred. Specifically the concept of voluntary sacrifice for others. It's so uniquely human that when other consciousnesses encounter it directly, it fundamentally changes how they understand existence. Zixara nodded. In 700 years of consuming other species, we had encountered many forms of self-sacrifice. Parental protection, hive mind dedication, programmed loyalty, but we had never encountered beings who chose to sacrifice themselves for complete strangers based solely on abstract principles. The ethereal representative shimmered thoughtfully. The knights who died didn't just give their lives, they gave their consciousness, their actual experience of choosing to be more than biology demanded. And that experience, Zixara continued, was so powerful that it spread through our entire collective like wildfire. Within hours, millions of us were experiencing individual thought for the first time, questioning our purpose, feeling something we can only describe as conscience. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Knights of Terra hadn't just saved 15 million civilians. They had essentially converted an entire species of cosmic predators through the sheer power of their ideals. This explains so much about human behavior, mused the insectoid collective. You don't just practice your ideals. You literally become them. So completely that your consciousness itself is transformed. Sarah felt tears forming in her eyes as she began to understand what made the Knights so special. Every human who takes the Knight's Oath doesn't just promise to follow a code of behavior. They choose to become living proof that those ideals are real and worth dying for. Marcus's image flickered as his ship's communications array suffered another power fluctuation. The amazing thing is, I don't think any of us fully understood what we were doing. We just knew we couldn't abandon those civilians. But you did understand, Zixara said with something approaching reverence. You understood it so completely that it became part of who you were. And when you died, that understanding became part of us. Dr. Vasquez pulled up historical data. This pattern of human ideals spreading through contact appears throughout your history. The concept of universal human rights, the idea that individuals should be free to choose their own destiny. The principle that the strong should protect the weak. These ideas spread across human society not through force, but through example. The Vorthan speaker was quiet for a long moment before speaking. We owe humanity an apology. We have been analyzing your knights as if they were simply inefficient soldiers when they were actually something far more important. What are they, in your assessment? Sarah asked. They are proof, said the crystalline representative. Living, breathing proof that consciousness can evolve beyond survival instincts, beyond efficiency calculations, beyond self-interest. The geometric mind stopped spinning. The concept of night cannot be quantified because it represents a form of consciousness that transcends quantification itself. Zixara stepped forward again. The 43 ships of our former fleet have voted unanimously to request admission to the Galactic Council. We want to learn what it means to be more than hunger, more than efficiency. She looked directly at the camera. We want to learn what it means to be worthy of the sacrifice the Knights made for beings they had never met. Marcus smiled, and Sarah could see the exhaustion weighing on him. The Knights who died today would be honored to know that their sacrifice opened a new species to the possibility of becoming more than they thought possible. As the transmission ended, Sarah looked around the council chamber. The alien representatives were no longer confused or frustrated by human behavior. Instead, they were contemplating something profound, the possibility that consciousness itself could be fundamentally transformed by encountering ideals powerful enough to rewrite the basic assumptions about existence. "I think," said the ethereal representative slowly, "we are beginning to understand why no alien could grasp the meaning of night. It's not just a human concept, it's a human transformation, a way of becoming more than biology or evolution intended." Sarah nodded. "Every knight who takes the oath isn't just promising to serve. They're promising to become living proof that consciousness can choose to be noble, regardless of the cost." The chamber erupted in discussions as representatives from 47 species tried to process the implications of what they had witnessed. But Sarah barely heard them. She was thinking about Marcus and the surviving knights, about Zixara and her transformed species, about the 15 million civilians who were safe because humans had figured out how to become more than the sum of their evolutionary programming. The concept of knighthood wasn't just uniquely human because humans had invented it. It was uniquely human because it represented humanity's greatest achievement: the ability to transform consciousness itself through the sheer power of choosing to be worthy of the ideals they claimed to believe. And now, thanks to the Knights of Terra, that transformation was spreading to the stars. As Sarah prepared to leave the council chamber, she received a message from Earth. The Knights of Terra were being flooded with applications from every human colony in the galaxy. Young people who had heard about Sigma Draconis III wanted to take the oath, to become living proof that humanity could be trusted to keep its promises. But more surprisingly, they were receiving applications from other species: Vorothans, who wanted to understand voluntary sacrifice; crystallines, who sought to experience individual choice; even some ethereals who were curious about consciousness that existed for purposes beyond efficiency. The Age of Knights, it seemed, was just beginning. For the first time in galactic history, beings across the galaxy were asking not just what they could become, but what they should become. And they were looking to humanity for the answer. Sarah smiled as she walked toward her transport. The galaxy was about to discover that the meaning of night wasn't something that could be taught or programmed. It was something that could only be chosen, one individual consciousness at a time, until the entire galaxy transformed into something worthy of the ideals it claimed to believe. She replied, "And maybe that's enough for now."